I'd rather create something that others criticise than create nothing and criticise others.
If you have high quality product behind the bar, it's like a weapon.
It's not about the figures, it's about who those figures are.
The Hospopreneurs Podcast.
I'm going to drink this beer.
Yeah, let's crack them.
With James Henderson.
Hello and welcome to episode 81 of the Hospopreneurs Podcast. You may recognise my guest today from his regular TV appearances, hosting his own show on Channel 7's Conviction Kitchen and having recurring guest spots on popular programs like MasterChef Australia and Yes Chef. Ian Curley is a British-born, Australian-based chef with a career that's spanned kitchens from Australia to the United Kingdom. Over those 40 years and counting, more than half have been spent leading iconic venues in Melbourne. Ian's signature style of European cuisine was built from a foundation of rigorous training in his early career in London. He's currently the co-owner and chef at French Saloon and Kirk's Wine Bar, director of restaurant consultancy group Exec Chef, and has had a successful partnership with the Melbourne Racing Club since 2013. Ian is meticulous, thorough, and very honest.
Hello and welcome to the show, Ian.
Thanks very much. This is the bit where you say, now, can you explain to people what you do?
Yes, okay. Well, that comes a little bit later.
Okay.
I actually like to ask first what a crazy hospitality story of yours is.
There's been a lot. Obviously, a lot of drinking and a lot of late nights and the like, but I think a crazy hospitality story for myself would be actually where we are today, from where I started to where we ended up today. When I was 16, I was in a naughty little youth detention centre and like kiddie prison, as they say. And then now, as I get to 54, 55, I'm, if you like, established, and I wouldn't say that I'm the greatest chef that ever was, but I stuck with the industry and I had a lot of fun. So 40 years later, yes, from where I was to where I am now. And yeah, it's been an exciting story. Still to this day, I love every bit of it. Even the crap that's out there,
yes,
you kind of got to laugh at it and go, you know what, it is what it is. This is what we do. And you got to love it. So,
yes.
You know.
Well, it's all to have that commitment for 40 years in this particular industry.
I only just realised it was 40 years as well. Oh, my God, 40 years.
Well, you stuck through. What I'd like to know is why you've done that. What is it that's really inspired you about hospitality?
I think what inspires me, I don't really know if I get inspiration from looking around at other people. I know it sounds a bit strange, a bit Nelson Mandela-like, but I actually do think we can change. There are people in our industry who can change things for good. I think whilst we've all had the mental health talk and also the stealing of wages and all that sort of stuff, it takes for us in the industry to be able to turn around and say, well, this is the right way of doing it. And I've always stuck to the belief, if you like, that there's a right way of doing stuff. I don't ever want to have to compromise on food standards that I have to do in any of my restaurants. I would always serve fresh rather than the frozen to not make money. I'm not money driven at all. And I know it sounds strange in an industry that is such bottom line driven. I'm not that way inclined. I mean, I think there's a whole lot to hospitality that you should look into the word itself and say, that's hospitable. Like, I've got friends of mine who come into the restaurant who don't have any money. I'd rather shout them a free meal as opposed to millionaire friends of mine who come into the restaurant. I don't need to gravitate to them at all. I just want to, not everybody on an even keel, because that doesn't work. But I think it's more the fact that I just want to enjoy life. I just want to enjoy what I do and enjoy the people around me who turn around and say, okay, this is what we're doing today. I have bad days just like everybody else does, but it's the little things that, like, in hospitality, there's that 1%ers. Could be the plates, could be the glasses, could be the whole vibe of a restaurant. All of a sudden you go, you either like it or I don't. And it's the same with the job. It's not something you can actually wake up and say, right, I've got the hospo bug, I'm going to keep going and going. I genuinely believe that throughout my life, you get offered opportunities. When you're younger, you get a lot more of those opportunities that don't really mean a great deal. Like, you know, you want to work overseas? Yeah, I want to work overseas. All right, let's go overseas. Mm-hmm. You think about it like that. And then now as you get older, you get offered opportunities that you need to take back and say, well, what happens if I do take this? So, I mean, something like in Australia where one of my jobs, I have to go up and down the country to Brisbane and Sydney and Canberra. It's a night away. That impacts on the family a great deal. So your time becomes more and more valuable because of the family that you have. When you're young and you're just starting out in hospitality where you don't mind working 14 hours a day, going out afterwards until stupid o'clock and then getting back to work. And it used to be a badge of honour. Then you were on the section. Oh, great, I was out all night. And look at me, I turned up today, still did 180 covers. I'm going to do it all over again tonight. It's like, whee, that's it. But as you get older, it does catch up with you.
What advice do you then have for people in a similar situation
situation to you that maybe some techniques you've found to deal with those scenarios better?
You can't keep up with it. It's not sustainable at all. And also, you go out, you can have one big night, and the next day you recover. You can push through a hangover, because in kitchen there's nothing better than working through a hangover, because you sweat it out of you, and the adrenaline will get that out of you. You keep doing it, it'll catch up with you. I'm not going to say I've never done anything wrong, but you soon realise if you want to be passionate about your career, you can't keep going out and like partying. It doesn't work. And everybody will tell you the same thing. People who think that they can go out till 4 o'clock in the morning, party on and kick on and get into work the next day, that's just nonsense. And it's not good for your customers either. I think you've got to look at it back from the source of who comes into your restaurants. Bankers and legals that we've got here at French Saloon or Kirk's, they're not interested in me going out partying. They want to see me or see my head chefs working properly. Comes through on the plate, it's rubbish, it's rubbish. They get it. We live in one of the great food cities of the world, in Melbourne. If they don't stay here, they'll go somewhere else quite quickly. And it's our job to make sure that that doesn't happen.
So what does that balance then mean? How do you extend that rapport with the guest beyond the venue without pushing yourself too far?
Well, I think beyond the venue means that as long as you've got the best interest of the venue at heart, it's good. Like we do a lot of outside, when I say outside catering, we might do an event at a winery, or we might do an event at a school, or we might do a festival, for example, but we go to places where it's going to benefit the restaurant. So for example, if we could do a cooking class at William Anglis School with the kids out there or the young apprentices, it's so that they get to see maybe there's somewhere that they'd like to get a job. We go to a festival, we do a festival where it's a food festival like Noosa or one of those, rather than doing a hot dog and burger thing, because that's not what we're about. So it's more to grow the name, and especially a young business like French Saloon, where you've got to put your stamp on a business and people need to hear your name. It's the same as any new restaurant. You've got to grow your business organically. We don't subscribe to doing any public relations and stuff like that. We don't employ a marketer, because I just don't see the point of like keep getting bombarded with messages and stuff like that. And I think because newspapers have pretty much died for food reviews and stuff like that, you've just got to be a whole lot smarter of how you run your business. I'm not going to pay somebody thousands of dollars every month to promote me. I'm just not interested in it. And I think giving yourself an unfair claim as to if you think that's going to help your restaurant, because that $4,000 we should be going back to employing 2 more staff or doing something for your guests. And put that $4,000 on the floor looking after your guests, as opposed to taking photographs of me like leaning on a balcony sipping champagne. I'm like, well, who does that work for? We think about our customer first and then dial it back. The only problem I find in our industry recently, and for the last couple of years, has been staff have been thinking about themselves first and not the customer first.
Yes, which brings up another question for me there. You brought up something around the marketing world changing, food reviewers in the written or print world dying out. And you said you have to be smarter. So what does that mean?
When I was okay, we'll put it in my cooking years, before the owner years. When I was in cooking years, when I was out and I was trying to make a name for myself and build a profile, when you were reviewed in the newspapers like The Age or the Herald Sun or the Financial Review, when the review was coming out, you knew it was coming out on the Saturday night. You would finish service, you'd clean down the section, and then you would wait outside The Age for the review to come out. And it could be 2 or 3 in the morning for the first press, straight off the press. And you would wait outside because it really meant that great deal to you, and you went, oh, this is it, you know. And also it made a whole lot of difference to your restaurant. The phones would ring off the hook and the like. Now, because those journalists don't have that power anymore, and also as you get older you realise it really doesn't make that much difference. All it is it's a free review. As you get older and a bit smarter, you realise that the hats and that, they're only good for your peer group pressure. It's not going to define your business if you run your business properly. And there it comes down to that. You've got to be tangible, that if you're going to invest that much money into a business, and we're talking millions and millions of dollars here. So there's no such thing as a good restaurant in Melbourne that hasn't spent a lot of money to be built. And luckily we're independent. I'm not owned by a chain or anything. I make my own decisions. You've got to be able to think to yourself, well, okay, well, why am I going to spend this much money on any particular thing, whether or not it's a cold water filtering thing as opposed to using foreign bottled water, or a public relations person. And I have so many people who will come along and say, let me do your marketing for you and I'll make you busy. I don't want to make them busy. My thing is I want my restaurant to be busy enough organically so that people go, we're going there because they do it their way. I don't want to be photographed making pasta in a Sunday magazine and people go in there and go, well, where is he? When I'm not here. That's not what it's about for me. It should be real. And I don't think by having people like marketers just market you for the sake of marketing, because they'll finish with me and then they'll go and promote, for example, next person along, they'll use you and say, I work with Ian Curley, I'm going to go and work now with Scott Pickett or whoever, Paul Wilson or whatever it is out there. And they go, okay, that's that. So you're just perpetuating their job. And I don't think they care enough about your restaurant.
How do you go about scaling your businesses if you are very involved in that process?
For the most part, it's the age-old thing. You've got to employ good staff. You've got to make sure that you're across what's happening. I don't know the day-to-day runnings of every single thing in the bank account, but we have an ethos through the group that says what we expect from our staff. It all comes down to the return at the end of the year. If you turn around and you say, well, okay, what we're prepared to accept could be 10%. Could be 12, pushing 15 if you're very, very lucky and you've had a massive year and it's been fantastic, depending on your staffing costs. But in this current climate, you've just got to make sure you've got good staff and you put them on, and you don't want your good staff going to another place. So it's a balance. I don't work in my business, this business, hands-on as much now as I used to, because I've got really good people around me. But all of my other things that I do outside of this business, which is my consulting company, everything feeds back to it. I use the restaurants that I have, that I own, as my calling card. So I'll sit down and talk to the owners, for example, Ovolo Hotels, who I work for, and I say, well, it works here, why can't it work in your place? And they see my space and they go, well, I would hope that they look at it and say, he knows what he's talking about. And I keep my finger on the pulse by seeing everything else that's happening wherever. Bar Margot opens, for example. I want to go and see what's happening there. They've got a new design, they've got new staff. This is the new kid off the block. You go, okay, let's go and have a look at that. You look at things, you go, I like that. Look at things, you say, I didn't like that. So you go from there. Like I said, I love my industry. I love what's going on. And I think the longevity that I've had is because of the love for it that I've got and how I assess it. You know, I'm doing an awards thing at the moment for a New Zealand company, Aura King Salmon. I've gone into the Stokehouse. I've met the owners of the Stokehouse and who I know, and I've said hello, shake hands. I met the chef, who's a young, really bright chef. He's got the next 30 years of his career in front of him. I can talk to him on the same level that I talk to the owners, because they realise that I've done what they've done. It's not an owner of a restaurant coming in and sitting down going, oh, you know, I'm better than this. I never treat it like that at all. I would never ever go into a restaurant and say, oh, look at me, I've got a one hat or whatever it is, or I've been in the industry for 40 years. I generally go into a place like Bar Margot looking at how they fitted it out, or the Stokehouse, and go, wow, look how much money they've spent here. This is good, or whatever it is. I just don't go into a restaurant looking at the things like food the way that probably other people do. But for me, it's not about that, because I realise how much pain and suffering goes into like putting something together. And it's pretty close to like, you lose 2 good key staff, your whole reputation can dip. So it's more about maintaining, if you like, the status quo across the board. Me being in the kitchen, I don't think is the best result for my business, whereas my other business, my consulting business, it works really well if I sit and mentor chefs as opposed to standing in the kitchen saying, this is the way to crisp up another piece of salmon, because how fucking boring is that?
Fantastic. Obviously, you've seen a lot in the last 40 years of your career. So what are some innovations you've seen over that time?
Luckily, where I was in England, where I was working, was the start of Marco Pierre White and Gordon Ramsay and the like and stuff. That was all their first big foray into it. And so I've seen that whole Brit-Pac scenario come to life. And that was very exciting at that time, because at that time, British food was really ordinary. And then Marco brought that out, and it was like a whole fresh approach. And then we went there from sous vide, nouvelle cuisine, to the food that like people wanted to eat, that with a new fresh approach. And now it's more, we're going back, if you like, the traditional way of cooking, where it's simplified back to proper food again, as opposed to stuff that's built up on a plate and tasting menus. I'm like, honest to God, if I had to sit through another 12-course degustation, I think I'd rather punch myself in the face. I mean, I see the hospitality industry and restaurants, you're there to have a good time. If you want to go to a restaurant and sit there and analyse everything, the crockery, the cutlery, the walls, the staff, what they're wearing, what these servers look like, the fingernails, the watches, the whole thing. That's 3 Michelin star stuff. And that, to me, that's not eating anymore. It's a different concept. We could not be further away from the truth there. We're all about the produce that we put on the plates. Hopefully the staff are happy doing it. And hopefully at the end of the year, myself and the other directors, we make a little bit of money at the end of it. By the time we've paid everything, then our calling card's okay. And it leads from there. So we're very proud of our little corner in Melbourne. It's not without its challenges, but it's like anything.
What is your biggest challenge at the moment moment?
My personal biggest challenge at the moment is time, because I've got a lot of things going on. It's how much you value your time, and that's something that I've learned recently. It's when it comes down to time, you can say yes to everything, but you'll run out of time and then you'll end up doing a mediocre job. The worst thing in the world is being mediocre at anything. I think if you accept a position with somebody and you turn around and say, well, okay, I'll consult to you and I'll mentor your chef and we'll put food on the plate that people like, you should do it balls and all. I think if you're going to do it well. And then over-deliver is my thing. If you over-deliver, people will say, okay, oh well, people are prepared to pay a lot of money to have me come into their kitchen and say, okay, what do you think? So you should over-deliver and you should do that extra bit that people turn around and say, oh, that was good of him or whatever. You know, I don't always work for money. That's just the nature of the beast of what we do in hospitality. But for the companies that I do work for, that I charge out for, I want them to turn around and say, yeah, he was good value, even though he was expensive. But also the people that I've been working for years. Now they've had lots of offers from different people to say, we'd like to work with you. And they've said, no, it's fine. We've got a consultant with Ian Curley. So when you keep getting asked back year after year, I must be doing something okay. Absolutely. And that's been good.
With the developments that have happened in the industry, I'd love to know whether you see the role of the chef changing in society.
I think there was a time there about 10 years ago with the proliferation of food shows and stuff like that where people thought that chefs had a bigger opinion than they should have, I would say. You know, you watch TV shows and you think, oh, that guy, they get a vision of somebody who they think is a little bit different to what they actually are in real life. So the people that you see on TV, I've probably met most of them. Some of them are fantastic people and they're great people. Some of them are not. But what comes across on television is not always what they're like in real life. But it's what people want to see. People want to see Gordon give people a hard time. Everybody thinks that Jamie's a really nice guy and he strokes people's hair and puts people on the right track. There's a lot of things happening in the industry that when people do have mental health problems, they go, oh, I didn't realise he was like that. No shit, Sherlock. I mean, it is what it is. It's a tough game. But it's just how you handle yourself and what you do to other people and how you portray to other people. I've done my own TV shows. I enjoyed it. Would I do another one? Probably not. If I was approached to do MasterChef, I couldn't do it because I couldn't spare that time. They haven't asked me and they probably won't. But I think from looking at things like the chefs do on TV, they should be doing something more. They should be standing up and then talking about their industry for mental health and the underpayment of wages and all that sort of stuff. The way that it's been portrayed that we're all robbing our staff blind and stuff like that. Well, it's not quite like that at all. It isn't like that at all. The good operators have always operated well. It was different a long time ago when there was a lot of cash in the industry, but now with the proliferation of credit cards, there's no cash in the industry anymore. So now everything has to go through the books and it's making you work your business a whole lot harder. And that's what's frustrating a lot of people out there, because you just don't have that level of expenditure now where you could turn around and say, okay, let's go out and buy a beautiful ice bucket for the restaurant, for example. Oh, it's on sale, I can buy it from the shops for $300 or whatever. Now it goes through the business and you go, do we really need that ice bucket? Because it's there. Nobody wants to rip off their staff. If many of my staff, whether or not it's a kitchen hand who can't speak good English, or if it's my executive chef who comes up to me and says, I need a pay rise, we sit down, we talk to them, and we discuss it, and you find out what it is about them. And if they work well for your business, then you have to look after them. And there would be my thing. People in the industry, leaders of the industry, should do the right thing. Whether or not it's to help with mental health, do charity, cooking with young apprentices, like I do a lot of that sort of stuff, and then doing free charity lunches or dinners or whatever. Always give something back rather than just take.
What other technological changes have affected the industry?
The whole industry now is, I wouldn't say 100% reliant on social media, but social media now is it's a massive platform. If you've got a really good, strong social media profile, I believe it's free advertising for your place. Now, I know a lot of people were originally, I don't want Instagrammers coming in and photographing my food and stuff like that. At the end of the day, it's free advertising. If someone wants to come in and take a photograph of the inside of the restaurant, whether or not they like it or not, they'll say where they are and what it is. It's people going, oh, okay, that's there. French Saloon, you've got to look for it to find it because it's down the laneway and it's up a set of stairs and it's a dark, dingy stairs. But when you open it, you go, oh, okay, that's pleasant and surprising. If people have seen it on Instagram, they go, oh, there's more of a chance of people saying, I want to go there. The technology of that, and also, cooking equipment, sous vide and vacuum packers and all that sort of stuff, it's been around for a long time. It's just now we know how to use them better. Yeah, the whole internet thing, and on the one hand, it's fantastic for advertising. The fact that a lot of people don't even talk to each other anymore is another thing, but it's not uncommon to see 3 or 4 people sitting at a table, photographing the food and not talking to each other. Would I like them to talk to each other? Probably yes. The fact that they're going to pay for the food, oh well, it is what it is. You know what I mean? You've got to look at it and everything and say, that's just the way the whole shift is going to be.
With those shifts taking place, what does the future of a hospitality experience look like to you?
I believe the hospitality experience will be that we're going to have to start running our businesses a whole lot better. We're going to have to look at every staff cost and look at every saving and say, we just can't afford that. Whereas there was the luxury of before having flowers every day in a restaurant, and how many restaurateurs have like gone broke by, they portray themselves through their restaurant and stuff like that. Now it's become more business-like. You won't get a plumber to come and work for you on a Sunday without a surcharge. Why do we expect restaurants to do that? That'll be the way to go. My thinking will be that the future of restaurants, and the only way I believe that we can sort out the whole wages thing will be that we do offer a surcharge, and it has to be, but let's categorise what a restaurant is, for example. Is this a restaurant where you've got to have sommeliers on and there's a big wine list and the like? So yes, it's a category 1, so there should be a 10% service charge, for example. If you want to use that service, there's a 7% service charge. Is it a cafe that's opening and they're underpaying their staff? The staff are backpackers, they don't know what they're serving, there's no real skill involved in it. So that's the category 3, there's a 2% service charge, for example. Then that way it should go to the staff. I just believe all this Saturday, Sunday on-selling, and also as a restaurateur, I can't charge $60 a head for a piece of beef, but I should be. And everybody thinks, I think the restaurateurs are making so much money, and they're like, well, they're not. A lot of them are going broke because first of all, they don't understand business, and secondly, it's a competitive market where I've got to compete against Tipo or Ilaria or Saks up the road and in this particular pocket because there's only so many business people in this area that want to come out for lunch and for dinner. That's the thing. Our businesses will be more streamlined, more cost effective, and the frills and the high living that we used to do, where we'd stop after work and drink a bottle of Mount Mary or whatever, that's not going to happen. It's going to happen that staff, it's going to be so regimental, I say, right, you can have one beer and you've got to get out, but it can't be a craft beer, it's got to be a beer from the pot and stuff like that. I mean, I know a lot of restaurateurs who at the moment don't allow their staff to have a drink after work. So it's like, once you're out, gone, finished. And I think that's where, and especially independents who open a restaurant, they'll say, okay, well, I've got to compete against bigger chains like pub groups who've got bigger buying power, whereas we're an independent, we make our own decisions. That's the way it'll be. You've got to run your business a whole lot better.
From a customer perspective, will that interaction with a venue change much?
I think from a customer's perspective that they've got it so good in Melbourne. You've got such a choice of places to go that you can eat so well for relatively cheap. I mean, people are always going to complain about the cost of anything. If I was to halve my prices, they'd still say it was expensive. If I was to double the prices, they'd say, well, it's expensive. So people are always going to find something to complain about. Food at the moment is expensive. I don't know of any restaurateur, apart from the big pub groups, obviously, who've got larger infrastructure and the like, who make a lot of money. I don't know of any restaurateur going, okay, I'm going to run around, drive a flashy car and I'm making millions of dollars. I mean, we're all working hard in our industry. And you know what? And that's how it should be. I think from a customer's perspective, there's going to be a realisation soon that the actual facts and figures of sitting in a restaurant, they are expensive and they're expensive to run. People will realise that it costs money, and it's more and more as the cost of goods go up. There's only so much of a threshold that the restaurateur can say, well, before I need to start putting my prices up. Seafood's gone through the roof. Like once we had the drought, lamb's now incredibly expensive. If you've got that on your menus, rather than changing your menus, you're going to say, well, okay, I've got to put my prices up. And then it's up to then the customer to turn around and say, well, okay, I'll either support that place or I won't. And that's what I'm saying about growing organically. If you've got a good place where your staff look after your customers and they do the right thing, people will tolerate some sort of like bending. They won't tolerate being ripped off. And I think for us, we're honest with our customers and say, well, okay, we don't treat them like they're stupid. If we're expensive, we're expensive for a reason. I don't believe we're expensive. In fact, I know we're not expensive. So from a customer's perspective, the future is you've got this choice in everything in Melbourne. Beautiful. We're living in one of the world's greatest food and wine cities. Celebrate it. Get out more, enjoy your restaurants, because you could be in really rough parts of the world and you think, Jesus, I'd love to be sitting down at French Saloon in Harbour Lane drinking Mount Mary and thinking, okay, I think I'll have the steak tartare, as opposed to being in somewhere else in the world. I'm not going to name them, but saying, fucking hell, this is tough, isn't it?
You mentioned earlier on the episode about one percenters. I want to sort of tie that in with a question there around increasing prices and providing value.
Yeah.
What are those sorts of some little one percenters that you think have, there may be two percenters, like ones that have more impact?
Okay, well, for example, you look around this room now, we're in the cellar here at Hardware Lane. We've got 6 or 7 wine fridges that are kept at an ambient temperature so that they're at the perfect serving temperature for white wine or red wine. You're running an electricity bill there for that reason, so that they can be picked up and dispatched straight away. The glasses that you have are Riedel glasses that are expensive. For every time somebody drops one, there goes a little bit more. It's not even profit, it's like the cost of goods. You've got to have good plates these days, because you can't just have a plate. You've got to have something like a Robert Gordon plate, which is made to fit the chef's ego and the chef's food. And then you've got the lighting. You've also the fact that it's in the cellar, because there was a space there that you are going to be paying rent for, so you've had to dig that out. That cost $170,000 to dig it out. A concrete floor that you need to put a drain in so that the rain subsides and goes out. Lighting, acoustics, you have all of that to put into a cost of a place. But at the moment, we're sitting here talking a podcast. We're sitting here empty at the moment. So you think you've got to take that risk of when you open a place, this is what happens. Tonight, it's set up for, obviously we've got a dinner in here tonight, which is great, and it's going to be utilised. But that's the game, isn't it? That's what we do as restaurateurs. There are restaurants out there that have opened and have done very well over the years and stuff like that. But from a consistency point of view, it takes a long time to get people to trust you, to keep coming back to you, so that they do rely on you. And it is the 1%. It's the difference between people who look at it and say, this is how we're going to do it, whether or not it's places, for example, like D'Estasio, have been around for a long time, or Francois. It's their consistency, it's their attention to detail, and they go, this is what I want, this is how we're going to achieve it. They're the ones that last a long time. And that's where we want to be. We want to be able to turn around and say, well, okay, let the French Saloon be here in 10 years or 15 years or,
How do you weigh up when the demographic changes? How do you adjust your menu or your environment?
Yeah, you'll see it. There's a definite change now to more about provenance and sustainability and stuff like that. Even 3 years ago, when it was all about tasting menus and people were coming in for degustation, and you see that and you think about the staff involved in it and having 6 or 7 staff to prepare a dinner for 40 people. You can't do that. That's not sustainable. I mean, you read about sustainability and stuff. It isn't sustainable for your business to have too many staff, because 1, you do have to pay them properly, and 2, nobody wants to be in the kitchen 50 hours a week anymore. I put an advert in for a job in Canberra. It's a $100,000 a year job. Nice job. They're not overworked. It's like they get to work with good produce. They're running their own race and stuff like that. I had 3 inquiries. 2 of them wanted visas from overseas. So the one guy that I've got who did try out for it, he's been unsuccessful. But you think to yourself, $100,000 a year job. They talk about unemployment. No unemployment in hospitality if you work hard. You can work 3 or 4 different jobs like I do because you're prepared to work. And luckily that's happened in our industry, that's how we are. I think it's a good thing. On the other hand, it's also a bad thing because there's not enough good people to go around all the good jobs. I think the next 10 years will sort out a lot of the ma and pa jobs where they realise that they just bought themselves a job rather than having to do things where you used to be passionate about cooking and go in, and if you were a good cook, you would be reviewed by the newspapers and people would come in, and the front of the house used to be either done by your friend or your wife, and then you'd have these BYOs and they were just ma and pa type things. You'd go, well, that's good, they're doing it good. Your missus would do the floor, you'd do the cooking, or the other way around, and then you'd do the books yourselves. Now it's lawyers and accountants and BAS statements and 7-day terms for your suppliers and stuff like that. It just, now it's business. And chefs by their nature, they're not businessmen. It's a creative thing. And for me, it's like, I look at it now more as a business thing, but also I've got better chefs who work here at the moment than I am as a cook. I mean, I know what I like, but they're passionate about it and they keep me up to date with what's going on out there. Like, I'll turn around and say to somebody, I'll use the example of Bar Margot. I'll say to them, anybody been to Bar Margot? And they'll be, from a crew of 10, 3 or 4 of them have been, and they'll give me their opinion, and I form my own opinion by what they'll say. They may turn around and go, the food's old school, and I'll go, well, I actually quite like old school. Or they may turn around and say, not sure about like the service, the way that it's a bit sort of like touchy-feely, and I'm like, okay, well, I actually don't mind that either. But it's how you make your own mind up. So, and I'm using the Bar Margot obviously because I met you at Bar Margot, but the guys who open that, they know how to run a business, they know how to run a bar, they've got a good guy in the kitchen, so I give it more kudos for the fact that they employed somebody like Danny there because he knows what he's doing, he's been around, is a bit grumpy, but aren't we all?
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Ian. I just have one more question.
Sure.
I'd love to know who you'd like to hear on the show.
Be interesting to see what goes on in Chris Lucas's mind. From what he's done for Melbourne, whether or not you like it or you don't, he's changed the face of it.
Chris Lucas is definitely someone who I would love to have a chat with. Thank you very much for your time today, Ian. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you.
The show today was produced by the in-house audio team at Hospopreneurs, led by Jake Olver. Voiceovers were by Angus Brennan. To learn more, head to hospopreneurs.com.